perhaps what's considered the biggest call-ups, right? The biggest names, or maybe the names that stood out a little bit on this roster. When you sort of move past the absences and say, okay, that's who's missing, but who got called in? I mean, we have to look at probably maybe the newest names in this one, although they've had a little bit of experience in the past with senior camps. It's been a little while, but newly drafted Naomi, Girma, and Jealin Howell, they've both been 1 and 2 respectively in the NWSL 2022 draft. They got called into these January camps. We've mentioned 3 players who have yet to actually get a cap with the national team. We've talked a lot about Aubrey Kingsbury, now Trinity Rodman. Naomi Girma is also included in that as well, despite maybe having some experience in the past for Kingsbury and for Girma with senior level camps. They haven't got that national team camp yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also starting to see we're talking a lot about continuity, right? The continuation of things, but we're seeing Margaret Purse named on these rosters, and she's being listed as a forward. And while we're talking about continuity, that's probably one of my other favorite things that's happening with this January camp roster as well. That wasn't just left behind in 2021. They're keeping that energy moving forward in 2022 by listing Margaret Purse as a forward on the United States women's national team. So I'm very, very excited for that. And, to see somebody like Morgan Gautrat get reintroduced to the national team, that's also a big one, I think, for us here at Attacking Third as well, because while we were covering the Chicago Red Stars in their NWSL season, they were one of 2 teams, right, Lisa, that we ended up having to talk about the most during the season, because they were one of 2 teams that made it all the way and played every single game during the 2021 season, every single playoff game and the championship final included. But it goes without saying, I think, with covering a player like that on our time at Attacking Third, she's someone that we got to speak to a little bit during their Red Stars playoff push. But this is a player who put together a phenomenal club season with the Chicago Red Stars, a team that lost Julie Ertz within 30 minutes of the regular season in NWSL. And despite losing a player like Julie Ertz, Chicago's midfield always looked like a midfield that was elite, that it was a midfield that was very difficult to break down, number one, and also very difficult to sort of play through and play up against. So having this player still in the mix for this team in 2021, and to sort of see her get this call back into the United States women's national team, maybe it's not so surprising for people who were, having to watch the Chicago Red Stars, in a close lens. And maybe it's also not too surprising for people who know this player's history with the national team. We're talking about a player who has 2 World Cups under her belt with the senior level national team, and also participated in the 2016 Olympics with them as well. So to sort of see her reintroduction to this team, I think should be considered one of the big call-ups in this one as well.
A number of them. I know as soon as Morgan Gautrat's release came out, it's the first thing I said to you. Are you pumped about this? This is huge. We even talked about it at the end of last season, that she's a player that eyes need to be looked at on her, because she kept Chicago alive throughout the entirety of the 2021 season. And Chicago Red Stars midfield was a force to be reckoned with, and it has been for a number of years. But Morgan Gautrat truly became the backbone of that midfield. So I'm glad you got to shout her out. Sandra, when we did our wish list for this January camp, we added Naomi Girma and Jealin Howell, the 2 newest draft picks in the NWSL 2022 draft, most recent one that just happened. We added them to our wish list. Jealin Howell, she was called up last year in 2021 for the SheBelieves Cup. So she's, I'm almost going to say, a consistent feature here, a mainstay, just in terms of younger players as they go. She has consistency in this sense. And she also has a cap under her belt with this senior national team. Now, Naomi Girma was one that we were hoping would get called in, but we weren't entirely sure, because going from the college game to the professional game is a big jump. And it does take a lot of players some time to adjust, especially on the defensive end of things when you're going up against some of the best, biggest, smartest attackers in the world. I mean, even like Christine Sinclair. So for Naomi Girma, that's a chance for her in the NWSL to really show her skill. So we weren't sure if Vlatko Andonovski was going to let her get some time in the professional NWSL league before calling her in. He did not. And I'm very, very happy about this because Naomi Girma is a defender that I think can really make a difference for the United States. It's her second full women's national team camp call up. She did attend in October of 2020 with this team. She was named 2020 U.S. Soccer Young Female Player of the Year, and she was the 2021 Pac-12 Defender of the Year for Stanford, and then went number 1 overall, which also we weren't entirely sure about that, if it was going to be between Jealin, Howell, or Naomi Girma, and Girma ends up doing it. So Girma being called in as a defender, the depth for this national team at the defensive position is constantly growing, and to have that competition and that battle as defenders to continuously get better and show your consistent strengths on the field is really huge and makes for a promising World Cup run, I hope, for this United States team. Another player is Trinity Rodman, because this was a nice surprise, a pleasant surprise to see her on this roster. She is the youngest one, although she was NWSL 2021 Rookie of the Year. She had a fantastic season with the Washington Spirit. We just talked about Girma and Howell as the 2 most recent draft picks. Howell, 22, Naomi Girma, 21, Trinity Rodman, 19 years old, being called into this camp, has a lot of young accolades already to her name, but she does not have a cap with the senior national team. So this is her first senior national team call up, and she is the only player on this roster that is the first time that she is here. Every other player who, Aubrey Kingsbury, who doesn't have a cap yet, she's also been at this camp. So
it's also wild. It's also just wild to like look at Trinity Rodman on this roster and know that like you're actually technically still eligible for the U20 World Cup as well.
Yes, and if that U20 World Cup didn't get canceled due to the pandemic, she probably would have been there. It's actually crazy to think about, but she's similar to jumping college and going right to the pros. She's skipping the U20 World Cup and joining the senior team. But it's just so crazy because we've seen Rodman play an entire year in the NWSL, but she's the youngest on this roster, but has more professional experience than 2 of the other players on this roster. So lots of young talent and at different positions, right? Rodman's a forward, Girma is a defender, midfielder in Jealin Howell, goalkeeper in Kingsbury. It's a lot. I'm really impressed with Vlatko Andonovski and how much he dug to find different players to come into this. And of course, Morgan Gautrat and Morgan Weaver being called in last minute, I think that's very exciting for those 2. And they are considered big call-ups because it's almost a last minute thing that they didn't initially make the list. But things change and opportunity presents itself. I just hope that those players can take this opportunity and really make the most of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love that. Like if we're looking at like biggest call-ups, if we have to do like a big 3, right? Or like a big 4 based on position, like you have one in each of those categories. So it's like probably like big standout call up for us, like Aubrey Kingsbury getting back in the mix at goalkeeper. You know, obviously for defenders, we talked a lot about Naomi Girma. Midfielder, we're hyped for Morgan Gautrat and seeing somebody like Trinity Rodman to sort of stand out on that front line for the forward core is really, really exciting as the team heads into this January camp. Unfortunately, like we said at the top of the episode, this is just a January camp. There are no fixtures or international friendlies that will be taking place around this January camp, but it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on for sure, because SheBelieves Cup is right around the corner coming up in February. So I won't be too surprised if we hop back on this podcast and react to the SheBelieves Cup roster and maybe try to connect the dots a little bit, sort of take a look and see who left an impression out of these January camps as we look ahead to February and the SheBelieves Cup.
Sandra, also a player we didn't mention, Mallory Pugh. She's back on this roster. She didn't travel to Australia at the end of 2021. Had a good run with Chicago during the NWSL season, and she's back. So that's another player in the front line that hopefully can score goals, right? I mean, challenge the defenders and do a lot. But you're right. This is just the January camp roster. It's not the SheBelieves Cup roster. So we'll see if there's any similarities, differences. And I think it'll be obvious who makes that SheBelieves Cup roster, how they performed at this January camp, because we don't get a lot of eyes and ears in this January camp, except when rosters and kind of how the rest of the year goes based on player performance and who else gets called up.
Well, we're going to pay attention to it. And as the SheBelieves Cup looms closer, we'll maybe try to make some predictions there as well.